how you've heard of us. I'm not assuming that too many of you have done, but if you have, it'd be great to hear from you. So, whilst Blue Dragon is a small charity, and many of you may not have heard of us here in England, it's actually very well known among those living in Hanoi, which leads me into telling you about how I got involved in Blue Dragon. If you could change the slide, please, Amali. Thank you. So this is me, although I'm not in video. That's generally maybe what I look like. So I studied an MSc in security studies at UCL. Yes, UCL. I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't be here. I apologise. But I know there's a lot of rivalry between our universities. But that master's included learning about human trafficking, and at the time, which was around 2012, the majority of trafficked people to the UK came from Albania, Nigeria and Vietnam. And it was Vietnamese boys looking after marijuana farms, people working in nail bars and other forms of slavery. So after I graduated, I was in the position you guys might find yourself in, depending on what happens with COVID. But all I wanted to do was get out of London and not read another journal article for at least another year, 2 or 3. And so I moved to Vietnam to live and work there for 2 years. And that's how I ended up hearing about Blue Dragon and started working in their drop-in centre in the communications office during 2016. Just before moving back to London and joining the civil service. So I have another question for you. So I was wondering who here has been to Vietnam before? No one? Well, maybe after you finished at LSE. But so if you could go to slide 3, please, Amali. So, as some of you may know, Vietnam can be a pretty chaotic place, and Hanoi, which is where this photo was taken, and Ho Chi Minh City, otherwise known as Saigon, are the 2 main cities in the north and south of Vietnam, and they're at a crossroads for many people coming from all over Vietnam in search of work, but also people from all around the world. If you could change the slide. Thank you. So many children and young people leave their families and homes. Change slide. In central Vietnam to find work. If you could change the slide again. In the big city, where many can find themselves in vulnerable situations. Could you change the slide again? Working as a shoe shine. Change slide. On the streets and sleeping. Change slide. Where they can find it. And this is actually the Red Bridge in Hanoi. So others have been coaxed into leaving their families with the promise of education and a better life, but find themselves tracked to working in sweatshops, brothels, or even intermarriages in China. If you could change the slide again. Thank you. So Blue Dragon helped to save these children and young people and bring them back to their families if they can, or provide them with the support that they need, whether that be material, educational, career opportunities, or counselling. I realise these numbers are from 2019, but you can compare them with the next slide, which is 2020. You can see that these numbers have increased. So all of this happens with from their headquarters in Hanoi, where I used to volunteer. And so when I returned to the UK, I wanted to continue to support the difference that this special little charity makes to the lives of so many in Vietnam. So I'd love it if you could join me, Amali and Ed to raise awareness and fundraise for those Blue Dragon supports. It's a strange time in which to be doing this, as we're having to come up with lots of innovative ideas, and I've already been so impressed with how you've been thinking about events to put on at LSE during this time of COVID. And to give you an idea as to how we've been affected by COVID. So it's been harder to conduct rescues across the border of those that have been trafficked into China. Human traffickers are finding new ways to conduct their business, and we're finding girls being trafficked to karaoke bars that are fronts for brothels and boys being trafficked onto fishing boats. Pregnant women are also being trafficked to have their babies sold. More kids are being used as child labour and exploited because families who were living on the edge have felt the effects the most. And some children have not returned to school because they are working or taking on caring roles within their family, as their parents have left the villages in search of work. Young girls in ethnic minority communities have been forced into early marriage to ease the financial burden on these families. And finally, many of our young people who had become independent and were working have lost their jobs and are needing support again. So we have many blogs I can share with you if you'd like to read more, or if you could change the slide, please. If you'd like to hear more, Amalia and Ed are organising for our founder, Michael Brosowski, to do a virtual talk. Next slide, please. So this is Michael, I think about 16 years ago with Street Kids, that he actually started Blue Dragon with, I believe. And it's always great to hear from Michael, as he's been doing this work for so long, and you'll be able to ask him all the questions that I won't be able to answer. Next slide, please. And definitely get in contact with Marley and Ed if you want to support Blue Dragon, and follow us on all the social media, which is on the next slide. So just search us on all of them, we're on there. And I would definitely advise watching the 3 TEDx talks by Michael, a former street kid, who was actually in the previous photo, and then one of the women who work at Blue Dragon called Caitlin. They give you a great insight into the work that we do. And then finally, I want to say a huge thank you to the UN Society at LSE. Next slide, please, Somali. So Blue Dragon has always been hugely appreciative of your support, and we're looking forward to celebrating 5 years of partnership with you. And this is a great segue to hearing from Victoria, and I'll let her explain why. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sophia, and thanks for all of you for being on the line. I'm like super excited. So you can call me Vicky. I think it's a lot easier. So just as like a quick overview, I think it was mentioned at the start, I went to LSE, and I currently work at Goldman, but I spent a lot of my time at LSE with Blue Dragon, and yeah, I'm just so impressed that you guys kept it going, and you're still sort of like supporting Blue Dragon today. And I know when Sophia asked me whether I wanted to speak, I was delighted. I was like, I'm just so impressed, and I'm so happy that you guys are doing it. So, I mean, just a background, like I got involved with Blue Dragon when I was in 6th grade, so when I was 11. And I went to the school called United World College of Southeast Asia in Singapore. And so it's a school that is very, very involved in service. And as a school, we're one of Blue Dragon Vietnam's largest supporters. And it's, you know, it's been something that has been a big part of my education since that age. And I've just grown up being involved in it. Michael at the time came to speak to us, and I was very impressed and very motivated by how humble he was and how humble the beginnings of Blue Dragon were. Like, you know, he basically started teaching English to shoe shiners. That was how he started it. I think that was very impressive, and I supported the cause through middle school, helping to run it and eventually lead fundraising events back in Singapore. Some of them being like our own version of Britain's Got Talent, where we kind of raise funds for that. So that's an example of an event we used to do. And I led it through grade 9, 10 before I left to boarding school and came over to the UK in 6th form. So that's kind of like how it started. But coming to LSE, I mean, I don't know if you guys find this, but I was really keen to restart my commitment to service. And at the time, there wasn't much that you could do at LSE that related to service. So I don't know if it's changed now, but at the time it was very much a LSE SU fundraising campaigns, Enactus, and nothing much else. So there wasn't really an in-between, and I actually wanted to go to Berkeley at the time, UC Berkeley in California. And one of the biggest pull factors for me was the fact that they had a lot of service opportunities there. I ended up going to LSE for other different reasons. And I decided that I wanted to bring that with me anyway. And so at the time, I guess coincidentally, the head of service at UWC back in my old school, she reached out to me and she asked me if I was still involved in Blue Dragon, did I want to be involved, etc. And I said, yes, I did. And she knew someone a few years above me that had started at LSE, had taken a gap year. And her younger brother was actually in my year back in UWC. This is like the group of us. And so she's the girl. So I guess for you guys, it's the second on the left, and that's Sophie. And she reached out to me and she wanted to do something. So I told Sophie that I'm still like really involved. I really want to be involved in Blue Dragon, and I've always been involved in them. So would we want to do something? And we did. So we weighed up starting a new society versus joining the United Nations Society. In the end, the reason why we chose to join the United Society was for two main things. So firstly, UN Society had a scale already. You guys had a scale. There were, I mean, at the time, I think we had around 1,600 members. I was part of the society, and I had been recruited by the president at the time to be the secretary of the UN Society in my first year. And I continued to do that and be part of the EXCO through first and second year. And so when I weighed that up, firstly that, and the second bit being, if you went through the LSESU, they wanted to kind of put all their fundraising together rather than have you be your own society. And I wanted that autonomy, and the UN sub gave me that autonomy. And I think even today you can see like Blue Dragon has a lot of independence. And that's so great, right? Because you want to do your own events, you want to raise funds for a cause that you like, and LSESU doesn't always give you that freedom in the same way that, you know, UN Society does. So I thought that was great, and, you know, it ended up being a great partnership, and today you're still partners, which is amazing. And with Sophie, we led the group, our first event. So this is a picture of our first event, actually, and it was a Valentine's Day candygrams. And what we did was we sent, we raised this campaign where you could send your friend or like your crush or your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it was, a bag of candy for Valentine's Day, and they wouldn't know it's you. We hand wrote all the messages and we tied them to the candygrams. I think we sold around 500, and each at £4. And that was our first event, and that was in February 2015. And then after that, you know, we progressed. So if you like just look at the different slides, I'm not going to ask you like, to change the slides, so you can change them whenever you want. But they're just pictures of other events we did. So we did a photography society collaboration where we had a Children's Day photography competition, and that kind of raised awareness. This is actually a picture of when we wrote letters to Blue Dragon kids. So we had like, this is outside the LSESU. And the Social Hawk Center, and people just write letters and postcards, and we sent them to Blue Dragon to raise awareness. We did a Human Rights Day panel with a human rights lawyer, as well as Bill Hayton, who's a BBC reporter. And this was actually an event we did in my third year, I think it was my third year, and it was a live drawing event. So it was called Draw Me Like One of Your French Girls. Quite, yeah. Anyway, out of pop culture, and basically we had one of our members had a bunch of friends that were UAL students, so they all came to LSE and they would draw caricature or draw your face or whatever it was and sell Christmas cards for £6 each, and that was kind of one of our events as well. So these were kind of the more fun and fundraising events we had, and of course we had awareness events as well. But definitely be creative. I think LSE kids are very supportive of that. And we definitely try to go out of our way to make stuff different. Yeah, it was really fun. Like, it was very fun. And I think after I left LSE, I joined Blue Dragon's board. And I was like on the board for 2 years. And it's a great cause. LSE continues to be like a big supporter, as well as, you know, many other individuals and other entities within the UK. But I think the difference is like with university supporters, you guys, like, the energy is there, the creativity is there, and yeah, I think that's so impressive, and I'm so proud that you guys are still one of the most committed supporters to Blue Dragon UK, and I really hope that continues. But yeah, like, feel free to ask me any questions about like other events we've done. Yeah, I mean, I'm very, very happy you guys keep doing that. Thanks.
Thank you, Sophia and Victoria, for sharing your experiences with us. We really appreciate it. I'd like to now invite Shazia and James to present and tell us a bit more about UNHCR.
Hello there. Thank you very much for inviting us. Oh, there we go. Excellent. Thank you very much for inviting us. So I'm James from UNHCR. So I'm going to kick off with a brief introduction to the organisation, to the history of UNHCR, a really quick snapshot of sort of the global refugee and displacement picture that we're sort of responding to at the moment. And then I'll drift into talking a little bit about my career, how I ended up at UNHCR and why I work here. I'll then hand over to Shazia, who will say the same thing. She'll talk about her career at UNHCR and a little bit about how you can get involved and how you can support and the kind of activities that we do in the community. So first of all, just to kick off with just a brief description about UNHCR, it's not like UNICEF or WHO or one of those UN agencies that has a easy to pronounce name or easy to understand name. You guys, I'm guessing, already know it's the UN Society at LSE, but UNHCR obviously stands for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, but we call ourselves day to day the UN Refugee Agency. We're a global organisation that's dedicated to saving lives, protecting rights, and building a better future for refugees, forcibly displaced people, and stateless people across the world. We're working in the field across 125 countries in the world, using our expertise to protect around 70 million people in total in the full displacement picture across the planet. So what we do is we protect people forced to flee their homes because of either conflict or persecution, delivering life-saving assistance that can include things as basic as shelter, food and water. We also provide fundamental human rights advice and support for refugees and for the communities and countries that they're in. And we also develop solutions to ensure that those who have been forced to flee their war and persecution have a safe place and a durable place to call home. And we also work, and this is something that's often neglected, but it's important to mention, is that as well as supporting refugees and the internally displaced, UNHCR also supports the world's stateless people. And we have a mandate given to us by the United Nations to end statelessness and to ensure that there is no one in the world that has not got a nationality and that everyone has a passport and a country that's their own. So Shazia, if you move on to the next one. Great. So in terms of running through a history of the organization and kind of bringing us where we are now, I've sort of put on this page 6 photographs. There's 3 initial ones here, which are all about the past, the roots of UNHCR, its history, and where it really began, which I think is particularly poignant in this year because UNHCR will be commemorating its 70th anniversary, celebrating its 70th anniversary this year since our founding in 1950. And then next year will be the 70th anniversary of the Refugee Convention from 1951. And likewise, the United Nations itself is celebrating its 75th anniversary at the moment. So these 3 photographs, beginning with the one at the top, these are all from our archives, which I hope are accurate. But the one at the top should be a photograph from the south of England of Jewish refugees during the war or immediately afterwards, it's 1945, who were resettled to the UK as part of the post-war refugee organizations, the International Refugee Organization's efforts and works, the predecessor organization to the UNHCR. The photograph on the bottom left is from a decade later. It's from 1956, and it's of a Hungarian refugee camp from people who are fleeing the crackdown in Hungary from 1956. And the photograph on the bottom right is of Greek refugees who had sought sanctuary in Syria during the Second World War. So in this photograph here, we've got the 2 examples of persecution and refugee movements from the Second World War before UNHCR, but which have echoes to the present day that the next photographs will obviously link to. And the photograph on the bottom left from Hungary is a response to a refugee crisis in Europe, but also from Europe, that also has echoes to what we respond to today. There's many things that have changed since the Second World War to the present day, but there's many things that have stayed the same. And our core mandate that was given to us in 1950 has remained the same throughout and has been as relevant as it is today throughout that entire period. So Shazia, if you move on. Oh, there we go. So 3 similar photographs showing 3 similar things, all linking to what we do today. The top photograph is also a family of people who have been resettled to the UK. These have been through UNHCR, and this is a family resettled to Worcester, I believe, a couple of years ago under the UK's resettlement programme, which is a large-scale programme that the UNHCR supports and encourages the government to continue, that resettles refugees fleeing persecution to communities in the UK. Most of it's done by councils, some of it is done by individuals who sponsor people to come across. That's a core part of what our office here in the UK does, why we have a UNHCR presence here in the UK, is to support this programme, which is something that's a really important thing that the UNHCR does, but also an important pillar of the UK's refugee response. The bottom left photograph, sort of replacing that photograph of Hungary, of one of our earliest refugee responses. This photograph on the bottom left, does anyone want to guess where that photograph is taken or what that photograph is a photograph of? No one wants to guess. Okay, that's fine. That's a photograph of Kutupalong refugee camp, which is the massive refugee settlement just across the border from Myanmar in Bangladesh. The Rohingya refugee response over the past 3 years has been one of the largest responses that UNHCR has ever had to do. It is a level of displacement that has rarely had its parallel in any other displacement crisis in the world. And the other photograph, we've gone past it, the photograph on the bottom right is the opposite of the Greek refugees seeking sanctuary in Syria. These are Syrian refugees seeking sanctuary in Greece, something which is far more common and something we're far more familiar with today. But it's just another example of how things that are old are new, things that look similar, look different, from the past, often have links to them that we shouldn't forget about. So if I move really quickly onto the global displacement picture at the moment. So totally, this is from our latest report, which came out at Refugee Week this year. The total displaced population around the world now currently stands at 79.5 million. It's been growing for most of this century, and is the largest amount of displacement the world has ever seen in absolute numbers since the Second World War, which is rather somberly another link to our origins. That the global displacement is that's the last time we ever saw displacement on this scale. 26 million of those 79.5 million are refugees who've been forced to flee their own country and are seeking international protection. 20 million are under our mandate as UNHCR, 5.5 under UNRWA's mandate in the Middle East. And then the rest, 4.5 million, 45 million are internally displaced, so they're displaced from their homes but haven't left their country. 4 million are asylum seekers, so they're seeking recognition as refugees but haven't yet been recognized by the country they're in as refugees. They're sort of applying. And 3.6 million are displaced Venezuelans. The Venezuelan refugee crisis is so complicated and nuanced, and the reasons for displacement are so confusing and massive that we put them in their own category because it's quite specific. Can you move on, Shazia? And then this is just the same thing in a picture, which just helpfully shows where the vast majority of the refugees are. 85% of refugees that we support never go further than usually the country that's bordering the country that they fled. So the large concentrations of displacement are in East Africa. So that's refugees fleeing conflicts like, situations like that in Somalia, in Eritrea, in South Sudan, and moving into neighboring countries like Uganda and Kenya and Ethiopia. Similarly, in the Middle East, the vast majority of Syrian refugees who fled the conflict there are in Turkey, as you can see. And then looking further east along the Eurasian landmass, the two bubbles either side of Afghanistan are, unsurprisingly, from the Afghanistan conflict that's been going on for decades. And what you can see is that comparatively few refugees move any further away than this, which is something that can often be missed from the discourse. The number of refugees in Europe, with the exception of Germany, is incredibly small compared to much of the rest of the world. Likewise, North America, Australasia, and other advanced countries in the global north. So I'll move quickly on to talking very briefly about myself and how I got involved in UNHCR, and then I'll hand over to Shazia, who will talk a bit about how she got involved in UNHCR, but also some of the things that you guys can do and we'll be incredibly happy that you're able to do to support us in supporting those refugees all across the world that we're trying to help. So so that's me on the left in that photograph. I'll run very quickly through how I got to where I am now. So I'm originally from Lincolnshire, from a farming community that's the least UNHCR kind of background you can imagine, and came to university in London to what is I think we all agree the capital's leading university, King's College London, to study war studies. And just joke there. Yeah, so I studied war studies at King's back in 2008 to 2011. And during that time, at the end of that degree, I did an internship at the UNHCR. Their offices at the time were based on the Strand, just above the Greggs, which I think is still there on the bus stop on sort of that Aldwych side of things. And yeah, I was incredibly lucky enough to get an internship in the current team that I'm working in now. And from that point onwards, I really wanted to work in this team. And it was one of those cliche questions that sort of, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And it was doing this job that I'm doing now. And the job that I'm doing now is parliamentary engagement, is press engagement and public engagement that I think was outlined at the beginning. After the internship in 2011, I went to work in Parliament as an advisor on climate change in the House of Lords. Then in the House of Commons as a parliamentary assistant. I briefly worked for Oxfam as a campaigner and advocacy coordinator across there. And then eventually this opportunity came up at UNHCR. And throughout my time at university and my career onwards, I'd always volunteered with refugee causes and wanted to work primarily on refugee issues. So this opportunity came up and I leapt at it. Yeah, I was incredibly fortunate enough to get this job, and I've been doing it for the past 3 years and loving it. That photograph you can see there, I'll just finish on this, is a photograph of an art exhibit that we have. It's a repurposed Syrian refugee tent that's been turned into that artwork you can see. And we use it as kind of like a basis for lots of our campaigning and public outreach, because it's just beautiful, but also incredibly somber, because the words that are on it have been crocheted and placed there. They're quotes from refugees that the artist sort of took when she was researching the project. And it was great. That's us building it in the Saatchi Gallery in West London. And it was amazing being able to like pretend like you're a really big shot artist building this artwork. And it was actually far scrappier than that. And we were just very lucky that they gave us the space. So I'll hand over to Shazia now, but thank you very much for inviting us. And yeah.
Sorry, I had myself on mute there. Hi everyone, so my name's Shazia, and just to introduce myself, I work in supporter care, community fundraising and events. So here is a picture of me and part of our fundraising team. And this was actually one of our Refugee Week events last year, and that was a launch for our first ever crowdfunding campaign. For Made 51, which is kind of like a new brand we've launched, which helps to give market access to refugee artisans from across the globe. So the fundraising team, so we're the ones who spread awareness and rally support and funds from the private sector for UNHCR's various programs. And this is especially crucial right now with the reduction in public funding and the fact that we only receive 1% of our funds from the UN. So my role specifically is to be out in the community, spreading the word about what UNHCR does, as well as providing support to people like yourselves who are supporting us. So thank you. And we also just have to ensure that the voices of refugees are heard so we can protect and help to rebuild the lives of all of those millions who have been forced to flee. So my personal connection to the cause and the reason why I started working for UNHCR is because my own family actually fled persecution in Tanzania in the 1970s. Now, I never really thought of my parents as being refugees. It feels such a long time ago, and they managed to settle in the UK and build a new life for themselves. But it did make me think about how any one of us could be a refugee. So if war broke out in the UK today and we were forced to flee, we'd all have to seek refuge elsewhere. So being a refugee isn't a choice. Refugees are people just like you and me, and they could be our mother, our father, or our best friend. So there shouldn't be a stigma attached to being refugees, and they do deserve to build a new life and to integrate into new communities and build better futures and have the same opportunities as us. Just thinking about how they've been forced to uproot their lives and come to a country where they're barely even able to speak a few words in the language. They've left their homes, everything. They've probably taken their entire lives to build, left family members behind, and not to even mention the emotional trauma, which we obviously physically can't see, but has had detrimental effects on them. So yet they managed to find the strength and resilience to start their lives all over again. So that's the reason why I chose to do the work that I do, because although we're the ones helping to build better lives for refugees, they're the true heroes. So yeah, we'd really like to thank you for having us today, for choosing to support UNHCR and to support refugees around the world, and especially at a time when the numbers are just unprecedented. As James mentioned, it's the most we've had since World War II. So yes, I'd like to kind of move on to a bit about how you can get involved with their work as well. So there are lots of ways to get involved. This could be anything from signing up to a mailing list just to keep up to date on our current programs, our appeals and our advocacy work. You'll also just be kept in the loop of what's currently happening on the ground. That way you'll be in the know of any upcoming events that we might be holding. So we haven't actually held events for the past months during COVID, but we're planning to hopefully start doing more online events. You can also support through fundraising, so that could be either on your own with your family, with your friends, with your peers. So you can take on a challenge event. This could be anything from a run, a swim, a hike, to hosting an online pub quiz with your friends, or if you have a special talent, you could host a live concert over Zoom for your friends. You can even celebrate your birthday and take donations instead of presents, or just anything kind of new and creative. So we had quite a few innovative challenges over lockdown. So we had a family who actually they did a swing marathon. So they swung on their swings for 12 hours altogether. Obviously they switched turns, otherwise I'm sure they would have been really dizzy with all that swinging. And then we had someone who did 100 one-arm press-ups in 3 minutes. He trained for that for quite a while. So yeah, you can get as creative and as innovative as you like, because yeah, people love to donate to really interesting challenges. And if you do need any ideas, or if you need any support, we're more than happy to help. We can help to promote your fundraising and awareness raising on our social media sites. And Amali and the whole team have my contact details, so feel free to get in touch. And in terms of actually working at UNHCR as well, or working in a similar field, so like James said, we offer internships for graduate students. And that's in the legal protection team, the external relations team, which is where James works, the admin team, and the Goodwill ambassadors teams. So we definitely recommend applying for those if you're interested. They're on a 6-month basis, so you can keep a lookout on the website for any vacancies. And yeah, and you can always, like aside from that, take up volunteering opportunities, which is a great way to build up experience as well as support refugees in need during this time. So a couple of ideas would be joining a refugee mentoring scheme, if that's something you're interested in. I know that Refugee Support Network and Hope for the Young do that, but I'm sure there are plenty of other places that you could join one. You could also join other programs like the Bike Project. So that's, they have a bike buddy scheme where you actually are paired up with a refugee and you cycle with them. So you cycle with them in your local area and you show them routes that they can take. And it's actually just, it's super helpful for them in terms of helping to build their confidence on a bike, which is ultimately could be the means by which they're able to go to work. So yeah, so there are lots of ideas. I mean, feel free to reach out to us. if you're stuck and you'd like some support. But yeah, thank you so much for having us today. And if you have any questions for James or I, then feel free to ask away.
Thank you, James and Shazia, for sharing with us all your experiences. Before we move on to the Q&A portion, we have a couple of announcements from UNSOC. So Fernanda, if you could share that. You might already be sharing that. My connection's a bit slow. Yeah. So our first announcement is that we have an NGO position, a volunteer position open with Blue Dragon. So this is a position that's for an entire year with the potential to move on to the second. And essentially you'll be working very closely with the Vietnam branch of Blue Dragon, and you'll be working with them to create online web resources. So these can range from podcasts to animations, to creating mini drama series, anything you really want. You have a lot of freedom to decide what you want to do. We just ask that you have a bit of a background in graphic design and that you're extremely enthusiastic about helping Blue Dragon as much as you can. If you could move on to the next slide. So our other announcement is something that Sophia has already mentioned. We have an event with Michael Brzezinski, who is the founder of Blue Dragon. This will be held on the 12th of October at 4 p.m. And he'll be talking with an academic chair a little bit about human trafficking in the context of Vietnam, the impact of COVID on this issue, and the general day-to-day running of an NGO. So if you are interested, it's going to be a fantastic event. Please do come along. And if you can move on to the final slide. So we've been talking about this quite a lot. If you've attended our past UNSOC events, we have a few officer positions available for the outreach division. Please do apply if you're interested. The application ends on the 6th of October at midnight, so do apply before then. And we look forward to working with you, with as many of you as possible. And thank you. I'll now pass this on to Ed to deal with the Q&A.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for listening. As we said before, feel free to write your questions in the chat now. It'd be very helpful if you mention as well if it's directed towards anyone in particular, and I'll direct them towards the panelists. So I see first we have a question from Sebastian. He says, I noticed that Blue Dragon has rescued a lot of people from trafficking, and there are a lot of types of human trafficking, e.g. slave labor. I want to know more about how Blue Dragon works to rescue them. So if someone from Blue Dragon would like to answer that or needs me to repeat the question, just let me know.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I'd like to say that Michael will be able to answer this question in a lot more depth than I can. But to give you a bit of an understanding that I have. So, for example, you will have sweatshops in Saigon. So we have people in so Blue Dragon Vietnam that go around basically finding people that are in these situations. They don't do anything at that time, but they will go back to they'll build relationships and go back to their parents, generally from central Vietnam, and tell them, look, do you realize that your child's working 14, 16 hours a day in Saigon? And they say, no, we didn't. We thought they were going to have an education in Saigon, and basically they get the permission from the parents to rescue them and bring them back home. And then they will, so Blue Dragon has invested a lot of resource and time into building the resilience of these communities, which human traffickers target, to bring labour to generally Saigon or Hanoi. And then we also have a dedicated team that works to locate those that have been reported missing. So, for example, a woman may be travelling to China for work, and then the family never hears from them again. And so Blue Dragon has has developed great relationships with the communities that it works within, basically. And they will look at how they can work to bring those women back home. So that's my that's my limited understanding. But I'm sure if you join the event on the 12th of October at 4 p.m. with Michael, he'll be able to go into more detail if you'd like. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Again, well, Amali, our outreach director, has asked, what has been the most rewarding aspect of working with your respective charities? So since we've just heard from Blue Dragon, perhaps someone from UNHCR?
It's a good question. I always find Refugee Week to be the most rewarding bit of the job, which I'm sure some of you will have already come across or will come across at some point. It's centered around Refugee Week, which is the week that includes the 20th of June every year, which is the World Refugee Day. Because so much of our job is serious, it's important, but it can be quite somber, responding to refugee situations and like legal aspects in the UK around where asylum seekers are treated or globally. It's a real tonic, Refugee Week, because it's a celebration, it's a festival, it's a way of just showcasing and supporting refugees who are in the UK in an incredibly and uniquely positive way. And yeah, it's arts, it's festivals, it's film screenings, it's really, really nice. And that's whenever we tend to do the more boring bits of it, because with the UN, more film screenings and panel events. But there's some real grassroots creative energy in that week, which is just fantastic, and I love being a part of it. Shazia?
I'd agree with you actually, but I'd like to say that I don't do the boring side.
Oh, that's true. My side's the boring side. Shazia does way more interesting stuff.
Yeah, I actually love Refugee Week because it's the time when we get to, like James said, showcase like what refugees are doing and refugee businesses, and help to just help to empower them and give them a voice. So just an example of what we've done over the past couple of years is we've had like the film festivals as well. We've had pop-up exhibitions. We've had pop-up food stores. So we've helped to like showcase refugee chefs or refugee musicians.